Alright, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to continue work on my 1995 Camaro, which we are building for the Sick Week Freaks class for Sick Week 2026. Now, we have less than a month to get this car done. We're shooting to make this car our fastest Vortec 4200 powered car. Now, if you guys haven't been following the channel for very long, this right here is a Vortec 4200. These came in 2002 to 2009 Chevy Trailblazers, and if you've been following us for a while, you know that we are a big fan of these engines. We have proven that these engines will hold over 1,000 wheel horsepower and do so pretty reliably. In fact, this one right here has been through the ringer. This engine has already been 8s in my station wagon. And if you guys remember, we actually took this engine out in order to put the 5-cylinder into the car, which is basically the Atlas version of this engine minus 1 cylinder. This is the first forged bottom end engine that we ever put together on this channel. It has a set of Molnar connecting rods with a set of modified Wiseco dished pistons and the infamous Faster Proms ported cylinder head. In fact, this is the last cylinder head that LS George ever ported for Faster Proms before he moved on to working for Cletus McFarland, and the combo has served us pretty well. Now, originally I was going to build a whole new engine for the red car, but I decided I would rather go with something that has a little bit of history and has sort of proven itself a little bit. Just because we don't have time for any potential failures. A saying that I like to repeat is, what does new stand for? New stands for never ever worked. And if we were to build a new engine, we have no history with that engine. This engine, I know it works. I know that it will hold 800 horsepower. I know that it is not having any weird issues. We're gonna inspect a few things just to make sure it's faring okay. And we're going to make a few upgrades and changes to the engine, but it's going to be little stuff, just here and there, things we've learned over the years. And we will be converting this thing to a dry sump, so the oil pan will be getting changed, of course, as well as a few other components, but we're gonna try and keep this thing intact as much as possible just because it's been serving us well. So let's get to work on tearing this thing down and inspect how this thing's doing. All right, so first I'm going to take the valve cover off and see what's going on below that. So let's do that. All right. Looks like everything's doing just fine underneath here. I don't see any broken valve springs. I don't see any signs of wear. Yeah, I'd say the valve train's doing just fine. All right, next we're going to pull the oil filter and cut it open and have a look and see if there's any debris in there. I've done that a couple times on this engine and it's always come back fairly clean. Really like running these K&N filters right here. They're a little extra tall, so they have a little more filter area. And they also have the hex on the bottom so that you can take a 1-inch wrench and turn it loose rather than get a set of oil filter, whatever you call them, or using a set of channel locks like we've done in the past, which it looks like the bottom of this filter got squished at some point just because the engine got set down on top of it, which is fine. All right, let me go get my oil filter cutter. All right, if you guys have never done this, you can get one of these tools like this. Has a little cutter blade right here, and it just kind of clamps around the top of the oil filter like this. And then you just wind the screw here in until you feel a little bit of pressure, and then start making laps. Now, some people poke a hole in it with a screwdriver and then use a pair of tin snips. The key is you don't want to use an abrasive type cutting tool like a cutoff wheel on your grinder or anything like that, because you don't want to put false contaminants in your oil filter. And make you think you have a problem when you don't. So we just keep making laps here, and then tighten, and then make another lap, and then tighten some more. It's kind of like brake hose cutter, except bigger. And as you're cutting this, you'll start to hear it starting to creak and click as the metal gets thinner and thinner. There it goes. And there is your oil filter top. All right, so now we have the filter element out of the filter, and this is gonna be a little hard for you guys to see, but the oil flows in on the outside and flows in through the center and then out through the middle. So if there's gonna be any debris or metal, it's gonna be on the outside of the filter. Some people actually pull this element out and lay it out on the table. We always just look inside of the pleats like this, and it looks like there's a bunch of dirt in there, but I don't see any metal. Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of dirt down in there. So it looks like this engine's doing just fine. This is definitely a good sign for the abuse that we're about to put to this thing. It's nice when your engine, you know, has oil pressure and generally performs without having bearing issues. Yeah, there's just a bunch of dirt in here. So, you know, your oil has detergent in it, and detergent, you know, you can think of like washing your clothes. The detergent will naturally wash any dirt or grime out of the engine, and it will make its way into the oil filter, which is why you have to do oil changes. So I'm going to say this engine's doing just fine, so we can proceed with our plans of, you know, making a few upgrades to this thing and installing it into the Camaro. And it's really good to see that this engine, which by far has received the most amount of abuse of any of the engines that we have put together, is faring so well. It really speaks to, you know, how well these engines were engineered, and I think we have a combination here that is working well. So, all right, next we are going to pull the front cover and the oil pan. Unfortunately, we have to drop the oil pan to get the front cover off, which we were going to do it anyways. So, let's get to work. There's still quite a bit of oil in there. That was fun. Time to flip the engine. Alright, looks like everything's happy in here. I don't see any bluing of the rod caps or any signs of distress. So I'd say we have ourselves a winner. Alright, so now we can pull the damper. Alright guys, next we're going to do something that I have never done before, and that is degree the camshaft. To start off, some of you might not know what degreeing the camshaft means. Basically what we are doing here is we are making sure that the camshaft, or in this case camshafts, are in phase with the crankshaft how we would like them to be. Any amount of wear in your timing chain guides or stretch in your timing chain will result in a change in phase on your camshafts. And therefore you can't rely on the factory timing marks for the camshafts in order to know that the cam is in the right location for where it's designed to be. Now when I say where it is designed to be, what I mean is we're going to look at one of these. this is a cam card. These came with the Schneider 66RH camshafts, and basically Schneider has given a design location for where they want the camshafts to exist in relation to the crankshaft. Now, with these engines, we have the access to exhaust variable valve timing. So I don't really worry too much about where the exhaust cam is, at least as far as degreeing the camshaft, because we can move it on the fly. We can adjust this forward or backwards in the computer, and it will change phase depending on where the engine is operating. Now, if we had intake VVT, I wouldn't worry about a whole lot where the intake was either, because we would put this thing onto the dyno, we would play with the intake cam timing, play with the exhaust cam timing, and figure out where each of them made the most power, and we wouldn't even need to worry about this. Unfortunately, the intake cam is fixed, and we need to make sure that it's in the right phase with the crankshaft. Now, how would you do that on a factory timing sprocket? GM's not ultra concerned if it's plus or minus a couple degrees. It doesn't really matter a whole lot for a factory vehicle, but for a higher performance application, it can be very critical. Now, in order to change the intake cam phase, we have a new product on the 4200 market, which I am very excited to show you guys. And that is this right here. This is an adjustable intake sprocket from the guys over at Performance Adapters. What this thing allows you to do is change the phase of the intake cam. Now, it has a timing mark for if you wanted to line it up with 0, or where 0 should be on the camshaft, but these numbers don't really mean a whole lot. We need the engine and the actual measurements that we make here to tell us where this thing should be. Like I said earlier, any amount of timing chain stretch or wear on your guides can result in a change in phase on the camshaft, so you shouldn't be like, oh, well, it's a 0, so it's good, right? You need to actually dial in this cam sprocket and adjust where this thing is in phase with the crankshaft, and it doesn't matter if this says -15 or 10 degrees or whatever. The point is, the numbers that we measure on this engine need to match what's on the cam card, and then we can play with it from there. Now, we have literally never done this. We've always just lined up the timing marks on the camshaft and wish for the best. And now that we're really going to start pushing the ante, we need to start caring about stuff like this. So what I've done is I have a degree wheel on the front here, and I've used a piston stop to find the true top dead center on the engine. Now, I've shown how to do this in the past for like when we set up a crank trigger or something like that. But in essence, basically what you do is you put your piston stop in the engine, you roll it the one way until it hits the piston stop, you mark your timing pointer, and then you roll it the other way until you hit the piston stop on the other side, and then you see where it's at, and you split the difference and put the timing pointer there. That will give you your true top dead center. So now that we have our true top dead center, we're going to start moving the crankshaft and see what the intake valve does with relation to the crankshaft. So let's roll this thing over. So we're going to pick a certain amount of lift as our sort of sync point. So we are way off, but we're looking at the intake valves on the number 1 cylinder, and we're going to roll this guy over until we get to probably 50 thousandths of lift, and then we're going to compare our intake center line to what the designed intake center line is on the engine. All right, starting to move. So we just measured the numbers on the camshaft. So when I did my measurements, I did them at 50, so I'm going to come up with different numbers. But the center line is what matters, meaning the center line of the camshaft where it is at peak lift. So I did all the math. I'll put all the numbers on the screen so that you can double check me, but basically what we have found out is that the intake cam is dead on. And I mean dead on, like not even a degree off, with the factory cam sprocket installed where the timing mark is on the camshaft. So should we install this cam sprocket? The answer is, yeah, we probably should. This cam sprocket will allow us to play with intake cam timing, which is something that we haven't played with yet. By retarding the intake cam, we usually favor high RPM horsepower, and by advancing the intake cam, we favor lower end horsepower production. So if we're having issues spooling the car, we can advance the camshaft a little bit, and if we're having issues with not making the horsepower we want up top, we could try retarding the intake camshaft and seeing if the thing will rev out a little more. But as always, there's a trade-off, and that's why engines with intake VVT are so attractive. They allow you to optimize both ends of the spectrum, and that's why I'm excited to play with the North Star engine, which is just off camera here. No guys, I haven't forgot about it. We will get back to it, but anyways, let's get this thing done and get this in the car. All right, I was about to put silicone on everything and get this thing buttoned up, but I thought I'd show you guys this thing all mocked up. So this is the motor plate that we developed, and it needed to work in conjunction with this right here. This little plate right here houses our front main seal and has this interface here, which you can screw a -10 fitting into and send the oil into the original oil feed to the engine. Also, I have taken this geometry right here and I have tightened it up and made it closer to the crankshaft sprocket so that the timing chain can't hop any teeth on the crankshaft sprocket. This is actually a problem that I've had with the original cover. It has this type of feature on the back of it as well, but it's so loose that the timing chain can actually hop teeth and cause you issues. This is actually a mod that they do to like K-Series. I think K-Tune sells a little piece that bolts onto the covers on the K-Series Hondas in order to accomplish the same thing as what this is. So if we put this thing back on, and before we put this back on, you can see it also uses the original seal here to seal up to the oil feed of the engine. So if we put this back on, you can see how well it fits around the crankshaft sprocket. I also had to install some extended dowels into the front cover here. You can't see the one on this side because it's actually behind this feature here. Those dowels locate the cover in relation to the front main seal and get it centered onto the harmonic damper. Also, we have added a nice little window here. So if we ever need to look at our timing chain tensioner, we have the ability to do that without having to take the entire front of the engine apart. So we've made a ton of improvements, and probably my favorite of them all is we can now take the front cover off the engine without having to take the oil pan down, because there's no pickup tube that registers into the front cover and doesn't allow us to remove the front cover. So now that I've shown you that, let's get this thing bolted up and get the engine sealed up. Now that we have the bottom end wrapped up, it's time for the icing on the cake, and that is this right here. This is a Atlas Industries shaved valve cover, and he has powder coated the thing for us. I felt like the red valve cover was a little bit too much red for a red car with a red engine bay. So I thought we would break it up a little bit with what you see right here. This is a black with a heavy metal flake valve cover, and I am really excited to get this thing on top of the engine and see how it looks. So let's put in a new gasket and get this thing installed. In the background, we've been working on more than just the engine. Dad has been working on revising the transmission tunnel to make more clearance for the Dodge 8HP transmission, and I have been working on making some mid-mounts for the engine. We're doing the motor plate, so obviously we're going to need some sort of support from the middle. Also, Dad has worked on repairing a broken shock mount in the rear. Frankly, somebody must have been launching this thing pretty dang hard. It's amazing how tore up this car is. You could tell it was raced pretty hard. But Dad got that all fixed up. Looks fantastic now. And we even threw a fresh coat of paint underneath the engine bay. I decided to get some color match paint from Duplicolor. The color code I think is bright red. I know GM is pretty creative with their color combinations, aren't they? No plum crazy purple here, right? Also, I worked on getting the rear end set up in the car. The car has a Dana S60 rear, and we need to change the gear ratios. The car came with 430 gears, but you could tell that the gears were set up incorrectly. They were pretty tore up, and the pinion bearing was totally just wiped out on the thing. We had to replace the pinion bearings and install our 373 gears that we were going to put in the car. And in order to do that, we had to make a few custom parts.
The things you have to do when you have to do them.
And Dad got to work on the lathe, making a custom spacer in order to make all that happen. But it's been very, very busy. We're trying the hardest we can to get this thing ready for sick week, but it's definitely going to be tight. The car still doesn't have even a scrap of wiring in it. But that's all we have for you today. Make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. If you enjoyed today's video, maybe share it with a friend. Hit the hype button, new feature for YouTubers with under 500,000 subscribers. And Happy New Year, everybody. See you in the next one.